is in terms of his attachment, which is what gives him his fear, what gives him his despondency. Krishna says one of the ways outside of this is that we continue to act, but we let go of our focus on the results of our behavior. And we just focus on the action itself. We let go of the idea of what we're trying to make happen, and we focus solely on the process. Now, that itself can be a little tricky. So Krishna gives us a couple of tools for doing this. One of the tools that he gives us is he gives us the tool of bhakti yoga, or devotion. How does that apply? He says, you can think of your actions as an offering to God, or you can ask yourself, where do your actions and their consequences really come from? In which case it also goes back to God. One of the things that Krishna says to Arjuna, and he says, okay, let's say you want to make something happen in the world. You want to make something happen in love. Where does that thing ultimately come from? Krishna points out that ultimately it doesn't come from us. Let's say that I decide I'm going to open up a yoga studio. Ultimately, everything that goes into making that happen doesn't come from me. Where did yoga come from? Not me. I didn't come up with yoga. Where did the money come from? Not me. Where did the energy to earn the money, put it together? Not me. Who built the building? Not me. Who did the advertising? Not me. Even the things that I generate, ultimately they don't come from me. I can come up with a catchy slogan, but where did the education that allowed me to do that come from? Not me. Ultimately, everything has an origin that's outside of me. And then ultimately, everything is contingent on factors that I can't control. I can't control the economy. I can't control whether it succeeds and flourishes or whether it crashes. I can't control whether it's the right time for people to come or the right economic circumstances for people to come. I can't control any of that. So ultimately, the origins are outside of me, and the end is outside of me. So Krishna points out to Arjuna, if we can stay in touch with that, then we can act in a way that remains unattached, it remains free. There's a wonderful passage in, actually in chapter 2, it's quite early on, where Krishna says to Arjuna, being such that their beginnings are unmanifest, their middle is manifest, and their ends unmanifest. What complaint can be of this? For every one of us, for everything in life, this is where we are. But we don't know this. We don't know where it comes from. We don't know this. We don't know where it's going. So, what can there be to complain about? Somebody does something to us that we think is mean, that we think is cool. We don't know why. We don't know what their history is. We don't know what's happened to them. We don't know what's made them who they are, what's made them do that thing. They may have no intention. They may have no awareness. They may have a background that we can only begin to imagine. We can't know. Is there any point in being slighted, being upset? Because we can't. Likewise, we can't know the consequences of it. We can't know what the results are going to be. Somebody might do something that we perceive as hurtful, and it might be the best thing that ever happened to us. And I think that's something we all can relate to. I mean, we've all had the experience of things in our life that at the time we thought were really, really awful. Job situations, personal situations. And we look back on them now and we say, wow, I wouldn't change that for the world. Yeah, it was painful, yeah, it was hurt, but it taught me a huge amount. It made me who I am. I don't think I would reverse that if I could. And we've all experienced that over and over again. So what Krishna is saying to us is, because we can't know where things are coming from, and because we can't know where things are heading, there's no point in getting attached to consequences, let alone egoically attached to our heart. Now, that doesn't mean that we don't act. And this is equally important. In fact, one of the things that Krishna talks about that's very important as part of that karma yoga, he talks about action in non-action, and also he talks about non-action in action. In fact, it's very similar to Lao Tzu's concept of wei wu wei, of action that is not action. One of the things that Krishna says to Arjuna is he says, the nature of property is to act. It's the nature of our being. It's in us. It's an inherent part of the material world. And in talking about action, Krishna says, look, I'm God, and yet here I am. I'm God, and yet I act. Why? Because this is the world of nature. This is property. It's of the nature. It's of the nature of nature to act. To try to fight that action is impossible. What matters is our mindset around the action. So if we look not at our actions, but how we're identifying with the actions, how we associate with our actions, that's the path to liberation. So one approach is to realize that because we don't have control over the origin of things, we can let go of those results. Another approach is, because we don't realize where they're heading, again, we let go of the results. We can treat it as an offering. We can treat it as something that's coming from something greater than us. Does that mean we don't act? No, we definitely act. And in fact, Krishna goes on to say this very explicitly. He says, do we need to act in terms of achieving any goal? No, there's nothing to be achieved. If we're already Purusha, there's nothing we need to become. But the nature of our property is it's going to act. Our body's going to act. And this ties into what we were talking about with meditation. Remember, we were talking about how our mind is going to have thoughts. It's what the mind does. Likewise, the body has needs and desires. So it's that. You honor that. You honor that while staying in touch with Purusha. And in that level, we can stay unattached. He also goes on to say, even though we might not need to act once we achieve that point of enlightenment, he says, the simple fact is we're surrounded by other people. Even if we get there, we're surrounded by people who aren't there yet. If we were to all of a sudden stop acting, it would simply confuse them. It would give them the wrong message. So he says, what does a person of wisdom do? The person of wisdom continues to act, continues to support other people in their action, while at the same time remaining